This is the Lesbian Historic Motif Podcast, brought to you by Heather Rose Jones. The show looks at lesbian and sapphic themes in history and literature, and historical fiction with queer female characters, including fantastic versions of the past. We present research, interviews, news of the field, book listings, and original historical fiction for your enjoyment. For even more historic research, check out our blog. Welcome to On the Shelf for September 2025. It's been quite a month. To start with, I worked pretty intensively to get my first self-published book out. It's not a historic project, being a collection of connected fantasy stories under the title Skinsinger, Tales of the Kaltioven. Some fairly cozy shapeshifter adventures with a low-key sapphic romance threaded through it. The project had two purposes: to bring these stories, written over the last 30 years, back into availability, and to use it as a practice project for the self-publishing process. If it sounds like your sort of thing, I hope you'll check it out. I'm planning to do an audio version of it as well, doing my own narration. The second big thing in the last month was going to the World Science Fiction Convention in Seattle. Worldcon was special for me this year, as I was a finalist for the Hugo Award for a nonfiction piece I co-wrote on some really geeky statistical analysis of award nomination patterns. My co-author and I didn't win the Hugo. I'm very happy for the book that won, but it was exciting to have the finalist experience and feel like a minor celebrity. I participated on several discussion panels, 2 related to history and 1 on constructed languages, and I had lots of chances to meet up with people, including my cover artist for Skinsinger, and 5, count them, 5 of the authors published in this podcast's fiction series. Then I barely had time to touch base at home and record a couple more podcast episodes before heading off for 2 weeks in New Zealand, which is where I am when this airs. This is my official celebrating retirement trip with my best friend. We're doing a bunch of Lord of the Rings tourism, as well as hiking, enjoying nature, and cultural experiences. After I get back, it'll be time to start the publicity push for next year's podcast fiction series. As I mentioned last month, I've decided to continue the fiction series for another 2 years to make it an even 10, and then shut down that part of the project. Let's make these next 2 years count. The call for submissions is up on the website and is functionally identical to last time. I'm still on my temporary vacation from blogging books and articles for the project, but in August, before that vacation started, I covered 6 items. First up was a retrospective essay by Emma Donoghue on her career in lesbian history, chosen as the 500th publication covered on the blog. Next were a couple articles by Susan Lancer, Befriending the Body, exploring the intersection of sexuality and class in 18th century England, and Sapphic Picaresque, examining a brief literary fashion for positive or neutral depictions of lesbians in the early 18th century. Next up were 2 items on the politicized medical fascination with the lesbian clitoris in the 16th through 18th centuries: Catherine Park's The Rediscovery of the Clitoris, and Corinna Wagner's Pathological Bodies. We finished off with Martha Vakina's Considering the Public Reception of Male Impersonation at a Time of Social Change in Turn of the Century Male Impersonation. When I regroup and start blogging things again, I need to look at my history book outline and identify topics I need to fill in. I've started working on some of the introductory text for the history book, so it's feeling very real now. And I really need to come up with some better way of referring to it than the history book. I haven't come up with a draft title yet because I'd like to clearly distinguish it from the Lesbian Historic Motif Project as a whole. So for now, it's just the history book. After a long drought in book shopping for the blog, I picked up a new title thanks to the recommendation of a fan of the project. This is a translation of a text purportedly by the Abbé de Choisy, a 17th century French aristocrat who was assigned male but raised by his mother as a girl and, after some experimentation as an adult, settled into wearing female clothing and having romantic relationships with women. Because history is complex and sex and gender categories are not stable over time, it's difficult to be certain how to classify Choisy. The translator uses the term transvestite. The English title of the translation is The Transvestite Memoirs. but the translation was originally published in the 1970s, and I suspect a different approach might be taken today. There's also the complication that, although presented as a non-fictional memoir, to which a fairy tale has been appended, historians have been unable to find any corroboration for Choissy's behavior in contemporary sources and consider the entire work to be fictional. In any event, I'll look into this topic in greater detail when I cover the book for the blog, along with other publications on the topic. Regardless of the interpretation, Choissy seems to have been a fascinating figure who sits somewhere in a sapphic adjacent space. Leaving aside memoirs that might be fiction, let's take a look at new and forthcoming books that are clearly fiction. The vast majority of them are set in the 19th or 20th century, which always leaves me hungering for a bit more variety. On the other hand, I think we've found all the August books that seemed to be missing last month. Some of the cover copy this month is on the long-winded side, so in some cases I've condensed it. I found one July book, not previously identified, Of Velvet and Stone by Catherine Martini from Juna Publishers. England, 1852. In a world ruled by class and restraint, Lady Violet Bridgman commands Hawthorne Manor with poise and precision. A widowed aristocrat bound by duty and tradition, she governs the estate with quiet authority, but her world shifts when a fall from her horse leaves her in the care of Charlotte Thorne, a reclusive woman who lives alone at the edge of the forest. Charlotte is everything Violet is not, earthbound and fiercely independent. Cast out from her family for loving another woman, she has chosen solitude over compromise, survival over society. But when circumstance forces the two women into close proximity, an undeniable tension grows between them, one that defies decorum, disrupts the safety of silence, and burns with unspoken longing. There are a lot of August books that weren't up yet when I did last month's episode. In the Wings by Charlotte Monet combines turn-of-the-century France with romance on the stage. Paris, 1895. Where ballerinas are as expendable as bouquets tossed at their feet, 19-year-old Elise has one sacred rule: her body belongs to only the stage. For a future beyond frugality and scraps, she has clawed her way up the ranks, enduring blistered feet and the gazes of obsessive patrons. When Monsieur Delaunay, a powerful benefactor of her ballet company, promotes Elise to principal in Giselle, it should be a dream come true. But the cost of her elevation begins to mount, first in favors, then in expectations, and finally in demands that make Elise question who truly controls her body after all. As rehearsals and relations grow unbearable, Elise seeks solace in the one place she shouldn't, the arms of her friend, a fellow ballerina. What begins as comfort turns into furtive glances and feelings that, if discovered, would leave both girls cast out and penniless on the streets. With opening night drawing closer, the curtain lifts on all the deceptions, and Elise, who has always been a model ballerina, must make the impossible choice: sacrifice her career to reclaim her autonomy, or risk love and freedom for the lure of the spotlight. The setting for Bound to the Sea by Chloe Clark isn't entirely clear. The content tags say Gilded Age, which generally refers to around 1900. But the plot is a fairly standard pirate romance, which wouldn't make sense for that date. So perhaps just call it Pirate Age, since the genre rarely aligns closely with history. When Cassandra inherits her father's pirate ship, she doesn't just take on a new title, she inherits a storm. She must earn the respect of her crew and navigate a world where loyalty is as scarce as mercy. But amidst treacherous waters and whispered betrayals, Cassandra's fate shifts with the arrival of a mysterious new crew member who doesn't challenge her authority, but her heart. What begins as a fight for survival becomes a voyage of self-discovery, love, and a daring quest for treasure that could change everything. In a world ruled by gold and blood, Cassandra must choose what kind of legend she wants to leave behind. The Girl from Berlin by Johanna Weiss is a fictionalized true biography that has been told numerous times before about an unlikely romance in World War II Berlin. Berlin, 1943. The city is a world of blackouts and air raids, of silence and suspicion. Lily Wust, a young wife and mother, lives behind the facade of a dutiful German housewife until a chance encounter shatters the life she thought she knew. Felice Schragenheim is witty, daring, and reckless, a woman living under a false name in the heart of a city that wants her erased. Against all odds and in the shadow of the Reich, she and Lily begin an affair that is as intoxicating as it is dangerous. Their love grows in stolen glances and whispered words, in hurried letters and secret meetings, while bombs rain down around them. But with every risk they take, the walls close in tighter, and Lily must face the cost of loving someone the world has marked for destruction. Diverging from the focus on the last couple of centuries, but veering into an alternate timeline in which women could lead the Roman army, we have Hibernia, an antiquity sapphic romance by Kimia Corey. Augusta Valeria, one of the first female Roman centurions allowed into the Roman army after Caesar reforms the roles of women in Rome, travels to Hibernia with her commander father to subdue the final piece missing from Caesar's Roman Empire. When an assault on her life by fellow Roman soldiers is thwarted by Aethne, a Hibernian girl, Augusta follows her into her world and soon becomes enraptured by how a Hibernian sisterhood can live without men. But as the hours pass and other Romans start searching for her, Augusta must choose between Rome and Hibernia, and learns that Aethne is not at all the simple red-headed young woman she first appeared to be. A Lady Called Trouble by Lauren Lee has a bit of a Gothic air to it and feels like it must be set sometime during the 19th century. Edwina feels instant regret after her sensible marriage to Edgar, which only intensifies when they reach his country home. Between Lady Caroline, the tempestuous ward he neglected to mention, his stark change of demeanor, and her heart's stubborn refusal to yield to him, she doesn't know what to think. The only thing she's sure of is that the way Lady Caroline gives her butterflies all through her body feels downright dangerous. After leaving London in a swirl of vicious rumors, the truth of which she declined to comment on, Caroline has her own regrets. She seems to have a knack for falling for the wrong people, and her cold-hearted guardian's country home feels like no place to nurse a bruised heart. But worst of all, she can't seem to stop thinking about her guardian's new wife. As Caroline and Edwina grow closer and the ghosts of Edgar's past hang heavy over the house, will they all be able to find a path to happiness? This next book has a somewhat odd background. The bio for the author, M.C. Collins, says she's the niece and literary executor of New Zealand writer Susan M. Gaffney. Collins previously finished and published Eve of Kilkargan, an incomplete work from Gaffney exploring a lesbian romance. In the current book, The Mistress of Hannesbury, Collins has explored an imagined life for one of the side characters in Gaffney's work. It isn't clear if this story stands alone or should be read in combination with the first. In 1926, 5 years on from the death of her husband and her ignominious exit from a newly independent Ireland, Lady Pamela Collingwood of Kilkargan finds herself homeless when her wealthy lover abandons her for a younger woman. Estranged from her daughter and disowned by her sister, she turns to her old school friend and ex-lover, Grace, now the wife of an eccentric social climbing industrialist with dreams of becoming a champion racing driver. Pamela is offered sanctuary at their vast country estate on the edge of Lincolnshire Fens, but the two old friends quickly discover that their schoolgirl attraction still simmers, shaking the foundations of Grace's idyllic yet unfulfilling marriage. There are a couple of Jane Austen takeoffs this month. The Scandal at Pemberley by Mara Brooks asks the question, what if Jane Bennet wasn't quite what she seemed? She was supposed to be the perfect bride. Instead, she became the greatest scandal of Pemberley. Jane Bennet arrives at the grand estate expecting quiet refinement. What she finds is temptation in the form of Georgiana Darcy, shy, beautiful, and far too willing to risk everything behind locked doors and candlelit halls. Whispers turn to secrets. Secrets turn into touches, and every touch risks exposure. Servants linger, shadows stir, and someone is always watching. Their passion is intoxicating, but discovery could mean ruin for them both. September books start off with what looks like a very fun regency. Ladies in Hating by Alexandra Vasti from St. Martin's Griffin. Celebrated authoress Lady Georgiana Cleeve has achieved fame and fortune. Unfortunately, she's also acquired an enemy, the enigmatic Lady Darling, whose spine-tingling plots appear to be pulled straight from Georgiana's own manuscripts. What's a stubborn, steely writer to do? Unmask her rival, of course. But unmasking doesn't go according to plan, because Lady Darling is actually Cat Lacey, the butler's daughter and object of Georgiana's very secret, very embarrassing teenage infatuation. Cat Lacey has spent a decade clawing her family out of poverty. The last thing she needs is to be distracted by the stunningly pretentious Lady Georgiana Cleeve. But Cat can't seem to escape her infuriatingly beautiful rival, including at the eerie manor where they both plan to set their next books. The plot unexpectedly thickens, however, when the novelists find themselves trapped in the manor together. In between ghostly moans and spectral staff, Cat and Georgiana come face to face with real danger, the scorching passion that's been haunting their rivalry all along. Time travel stories hold an uncertain place in the historic genre, but this one looks intriguing. When the Light Pulls You Back by Carrie Miller. Buffalo, New York, 1986. Mina Melton has always been drawn to traces of the past, the fading lines of old buildings, the worn streets of her city, and the stories of women whose lives shaped the world in quiet, enduring ways. But when she and her best friend Lillian are pulled through time to the 1901 Pan American Exposition, where the glittering surface hides a far less perfect reality, history becomes something more immediate, more fragile, more alive. Caught between two centuries, the girls search for a way home and stumble instead upon a frightened child, a missing bag of coins, and the slow realization that the past cannot be separated from the present, or from the future. As they move through a world where women's stories are so often lost or overlooked, Mina and Lillian begin to understand not only the weight of history, but the risks of the heart, and the truth of what they've meant to each other all along. We have an interview later in this episode with Kathy Pego, the author of A Murderous Business, a Harriman and Mancini mystery, from Minotaur Books. There can be a blurry line between what is ethical and what is legal. Margot Baxter Harriman took the reins of B&H Foods after her father passed. It's not easy being a businesswoman in 1912, but she is determined to continue what her grandparents started decades ago, no matter what it takes. So when Margot finds Mrs. Gilroy, her father's former assistant, dead in the office with a half-finished note confessing to nebulous misdeeds at B&H, she seeks out help from a very discreet private investigator to figure out what's going on. Her company and her good name are at stake if scandal breaks, and she could lose everything, including her freedom. Rhett Mancini, has run her father's investigation operation since he started becoming increasingly forgetful. When Margot offers her the chance to look into the potential scandal with B&H, she jumps at the chance. But the more the two dig in, the more it becomes clear that Margot's company may be too far lost, and someone is willing to kill them both to keep things quiet. I've condensed the cover copy for Claiming the Tower, Council Mysteries No. 1 by Celia Lake. The story is set in the author's elaborate alternate history in which magical communities interact with the history we know. Harrisworth is frustrated with the world. There's the utter mismanagement of the war in the Crimea. While she moves among the diplomatic set of London, she's limited in what she can do there by her gender and their assumptions. She has more scope within Britain's magical community, but expectations hem her in there as well. Harrisworth loves the times she can retreat to her family home, her father, and their library. Bess has moved from house to house as companion to a series of increasingly difficult older women. Her current position has narrowed her world to tangled embroidery thread, small household tribulations, and dealing with her mistress's whims and changes of mood. When Harrisworth and Bess begin to talk, both of them begin to wonder what the world might look like if things were a little different. Are they brave enough to change the world? We have another pirate romance, Tides of Reckoning, Daughters Under the Black Flag, No. 2, by Eden Hopewell. Izzy Montgomery thought she'd found freedom when she traded silk gowns and societal expectations for the rough life of a pirate. But on the Poseidon's Daughter, even among her newfound family, shadows linger. Haunted by a past she can't outrun, and the threat of the notorious pirate hunter James Morley looming over the horizon, Izzy is determined to prove herself worthy of Captain Blackthorn's trust and earn her place among the fierce women of the crew. Sailing the treacherous Caribbean waters alongside her best friend Gracie and her lover Anne-Marie, Izzy faces a new challenge. Morley's power is on the rise, his influence reaching even the shores of Tortuga. When a risky mission to infiltrate his inner circle goes disastrously wrong, Izzy and Gracie disappear, swallowed by the very world they sought to conquer. If you enjoyed the book or movie Hidden Figures, then To the Moon and Back by Eve Noble is going to be right up your alley. I've condensed the cover copy a bit. Two brilliant minds, one impossible equation. Gloria Johnson can calculate lunar trajectories in her sleep, but as a black woman at NASA in 1969, she's stuck typing other people's equations. Then she gets paired with Dr. Katerina Ivanova, the mysterious Russian defector who challenges every equation she thought she'd mastered. Katerina Ivanova fled the Soviet Union for scientific freedom, only to find herself trapped by American bureaucracy. Her mother is still in Moscow, and the security chief holding her visa hostage wants one thing: intel on Gloria's family and their civil rights activities. Professional competition turns personal fast. Gloria introduces Katrina to Star Trek. Katrina makes Gloria traditional Russian tea. Soon their rivalry becomes something much more dangerous: attraction. The social dynamics in Ladylike by Mackenzie Lee from Dial Press strike me as decidedly implausible. But if you're in for a Regency romp that doesn't worry about such things, check it out. Again, I've condensed a little. Harriet Lockhart never planned to marry. The educated daughter of a high-class prostitute, Harry has spent her life defying expectations, all while being subsidized by her late mother's trust. When she is contacted out of the blue by her hitherto anonymous father, she finds herself at risk of losing the trust that he actually funds, unless she acquiesces to his request that she lead a more respectable life, starting with finding a husband. Emily Sargent has only ever wanted to marry. If not for one mistake in her youth that rendered her a social pariah, she would be appropriately betrothed. Desperate for an alternative to the only man willing to marry her, Emily flees to London. Worlds collide, dramatically and hilariously, when both women decide on the very same Duke as their best possible chance at a tolerable husband and the security that he brings. In a tongue-in-cheek romp, Harry and Emily compete for the Duke's favor, only to find their true heart's desires may be more compatible than they ever could have predicted. Our second Jane Austen novel is The Shocking Experiments of Miss Mary Bennet by Melinda Taub from Grand Central Publishing. Mary Bennet is the middlest middle child of all time. Awkward, plain, and overlooked, she's long been out of favor not only with her own family, but with generations of readers of Pride and Prejudice. But what was Mary really doing while her sisters were falling in love? Well, what does any bright, intrepid girl do at an age when brains and hard work are only valued if they come with a pretty face? Take to the attic and teach herself to reanimate the dead, of course. The world refuses to make a place for peculiar Mary, but no Bennet sister ever gives up on happiness that easily. If it won't give this fierce, lonely girl a place, she'll carve one out herself, and if finding acceptance requires a husband, she'll get one, even if she has to make him herself too. However, Mary's genius and determination aren't enough to control what she unwittingly unleashes. Her desperate attempts to rein in the destruction wreaked by her creation leads her to forge a perhaps unlikely friendship with another brilliant young woman, unlike any she's ever known. As that friendship blossoms into something passionate and all-consuming, Mary begins to realize that she may have to choose between the acceptance she's always fought for and true happiness. The Crooked Medium's Guide to Murder by Stephen Cox takes the Victorian obsession with spiritualism in an unexpected direction. London, 1881. Can two crooked women stop a murder? Extravagant medium Mrs. Ashton and her lover, blunt working-class Mrs. Bradshaw, run a spiritualist scam. Mrs. Ashton secretly reads minds. Grieving Lady Violet craves the truth behind her mother's untimely death, but Lady Violet's powerful husband, Sir Charles, hates spiritualists. Has he killed before? Uncovering this MP's wicked crimes puts all three women in terrible danger. To solve a shocking murder, look both sides of the grave. A joyous romp with a serious core, taking a wry look at Victorian hypocrisy, this twisty and gripping thriller goes from Dockland slums to a country estate and the Old Bailey. Aided by Maisie, the sharpest and smartest Docklass detective ever, they struggle to bring a powerful man to justice. Whatever laws they have broken, these rogues cannot stomach murder. This extraordinary case threatens all their certainties. It could divide them forever, and if Mrs. Ashton were to run into Mr. Sherlock Holmes, she could teach him a thing or two. 16th century Holland is the setting for I Am You by Victoria Redl from SJP Lit. The author indicates it's a reimagining of the biography of a real-life painter. At 8 years old, Gerta Peters is forced to disguise herself as a boy and sent to work for a genteel Dutch family. When their brilliant and beautiful daughter, Maria, sees through Gerta's ruse, she insists that Gerta accompany her to Amsterdam and help her enter the elite, male-dominated art world. While Maria rises in the ranks of society as a painting prodigy, Gerta makes herself invaluable in every way: confidant, muse, lover. But as Gerta steps into her own talents, their relationship fractures into a complex web of obsession and rivalry, and the secrets they keep threaten to unravel everything. This month, the Other Books of Interest section contains several titles that just felt a little off without raising full alarm bells. I'm including them with a brief description, but with caveats. Dora Copperfield, A Quiet Bloom by Kit Indigo from Rose Angel Publishing is a reimagining of the story of Dora from Charles Dickens' David Copperfield. It's always interesting to imagine an interior life for characters who weren't given one by their original authors, but the cover copy feels oddly generic to me. Dora is given a personal awakening and a sapphic romance. When I came across the listing for The Book of Susan by Roxana Di Bella and looked into the author's other titles, it became clear that she has a standard modus operandi that makes her biography and the entire body of work look like a work of fiction itself. Di Bella has published 10 books in the last 3 years, all historical stories that she claims are based on actual documentation, letters, diaries, etc., that have come into her hands either due to a family connection or due to relatives of the book's subject entrusting the materials to her. There's a common theme that the story has been suppressed due to the lesbian aspect, but is now being made public with the names changed, which, of course, makes it impossible to research the truth of the claims. If the books had simply been presented as invented fictions, they wouldn't have raised my suspicions. But the repeated pattern of claiming secret documentary sources just feels off. The Book of Susan concerns suppressed information from the Dead Sea Scrolls, giving hints of same-sex relations among early Christians. A Flower in Auschwitz involves a World War II concentration camp romance between a nurse and a prisoner. If you're curious about her earlier titles, they're linked to these in the Amazon records. And what have I been reading? Checking my notes, it appears to have been just 2 audiobooks. After enjoying the TV series of Murderbot by Martha Wells, I've decided to try the books again, starting with All Systems Red. I'd read one of the later books a couple years ago and rather bounced off it due to the percentage of blow-by-blow battle scenes. All Systems Red worked better for me, so maybe I just needed to start at the beginning and get more invested in the characters. I also listened to the audiobook of Ann Leckie's short story collection, Lake of Souls. This is a combination of stories set in 2 of the worlds of her longer works, plus a number of standalones. The title story is one of the best depictions of an alien culture I've seen in a long time. Leckie's handling of aliens reminds me a lot of C.J. Sherry. I plan to have some reading time during my New Zealand trip, so maybe I'll have a better account next month. And we have an interview this month with author Kathy Pega about her new book. Today, Kathy Pega is here to talk to us about her most recent book, A Murderous Business. Welcome, Kathy.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Why don't you start by giving us a brief synopsis of your new book?
Okay. Murderous Business. It is a historical cozy crime novel where Margot Baxter Harriman, she is the CEO and president of a food canning company. Now, it's in 1912 in New York, so early 1900s. She is a woman of business, inherited the business from her father. It was a family company. And she goes into work one day to pick up a report and finds the body of her father's former assistant in one of the offices with a half-finished note about some shenanigans that have been going on that have had some actually deadly consequences. So Margot doesn't know what's happening. She has done, and she hires Rhett Mancini, a private investigator. Actually, she's her father's secretary Her father's a former police officer who is opened his own private investigation business, and Margot hires Rhett to figure out what's going on. And there's businessy kind of like I said, shenanigans going on, and she and Margot are trying to figure out what the assistant had been referring to. And so along the way, there's they learn that there are some not great practices happening in Margot's business that she had no idea about. She was just completely oblivious to. So yeah, there is another body along the way. Mostly it's about I like this my editor actually coined this for me or brought it up. Pushing back against the heteropatriarchy. I love it. I love it. I love that term. And it's because both women are in what is considered, especially back in the day, male-oriented positions. They are both queer. And one is Rhett lives with her girlfriend, and Margot is kind of, doing her own thing. But it's how they're perceived is important, and what their expectations or what society expects of them. Oh, you're in this category. You're a woman. Your business acumen is not, necessarily on, par with the rest of us, kind of thing. So it is a push against the heteropatriarchy. So,
And I think I saw some reference to this is the start of a series.
it is. I hope. My fingers are crossed. I just turned in the second book. Just the first draft of that. And that one, not quite sure if it'll stay the way it is, but that one is actually set in hospitals and clinics, but we'll see what happens with that one. But yeah, so I'm hoping that it's the Harriman and Mancini series. I have the second book that was turned in. I have a third book in mind. We'll see what happens there. And I'd like to keep exploring, not only because Margot comes from a very obviously well-to-do family. She's had money all her life, even though her parents might not have, but she's had money all her life, so she's in the upper echelons of the New York society. Whereas Rhett, her dad was a cop. She's very good at like blending in like the Lower East Side, and with the less savory folks. Rhett's best friend is a pickpocket. So, who taught her how to pick locks. So it's people like that I want to keep exploring the differences between Rhett's world and Margot's world, and how they have similarities, but also some vast differences that not just for them, but for other folks of their socioeconomic classes and queerness in a time when it was essentially illegal to be queer publicly.
We first met in the context of the Golden Crown Literary Society conference. And so I tend to think of you as an author of sapphic stories, but that isn't always the case. What part do queer characters play in your work overall?
At least in my head, maybe not necessarily on the page, but at least in my head, there's at least one queer character, if not in the forefront, somewhere in the story. Everything from even the historical mysteries that I have set here in my town. The main character is a straight woman, but who's investigating murders, but her grows a friendship with the local madam who happens to be bi. So it's not on the page necessarily, except for some comments she makes. My thought is queer people have always been around. They're going to be in stories because people are in stories. So they're going to be there. Whether or not that is pertinent to the story doesn't matter. They're still there. So there's almost always a queer character of some degree of representation
you have a rather varied catalog of works like science fiction and mystery,
Hmm.
paranormal and historicals. Do you feel like there's some underlying theme across all of those, or do you just write whatever comes to mind?
I always wonder about this question because I always, oh, what's the theme of your book? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just writing a story. I was just coming. But I think part of it is I think sometimes I have a theme of recognizing you know, who you are and your worth and your abilities. I think that's kind of a theme that I have kind of going through there. Like you the characters they want to succeed in whatever, of course, their conflict is, because that's the story. But sometimes they're not quite sure of themselves and being themselves. So I'm trying to, you know, I think that's kind of something that I'm trying to put out there. Like, but mostly it's, oh, this sounds like a good story. Because I have to like the story. I have to, like any writer, you have to be excited about the story
Uh,
and the characters. And sometimes a theme comes out of that. It happens, but I don't necessarily start with, oh, I'm going to write a story about X, Y, or Z. But X, Y, or Z are often underlying in what I'm writing, if that makes any kind of sense.
so you live in Alaska. I know you
I
sort of
do.
alluded to your local setting, but you didn't specifically mention it, and our listeners may not know that. And I have followed you on social media for a long time, like over 10 years at this
I
point.
know it's been a while.
And sometimes it feels like you live this very iconically Alaskan life because you're talking about it's like, oh, we're going out for the salmon fishing, or my husband bought a bag of moose, oh, it's time for moose tacos, and things like that.
I am not living the Alaska life. I'm living my husband is very much a happy Alaskan boy at this, especially now. He just retired actually.
Uh-huh.
So in fact, right now he's out berry picking. It's berry season. So between fishing seasons. Um, so I'm living vicariously, which is great because I'm not an outdoorsy person, really. But we'll go out the road. And it's a very familiar term around here. We go out the road and it's within 12 miles of my house, which is fairly in this suburban-ish kind of situation. There's very little, 12, 15 miles out. It's wilderness. Yeah, so we'll go out and we'll run the dogs on a dirt road somewhere. So they're doing that. But yeah, that's about as far as my Alaskaness goes. My husband does fish, so we have fish a lot. Like he does do bear. He's like I said, he's the Alaskan in the family. I'm just reaping the benefits of his thing. But it has its challenges. The town we live in, is not on an island, but you think it would be because you can only get to us by airplane or boat. There is no road to our town. There used to be a railroad, which is part of the historical series. It talks about the railroad a lot, but the railroad, it was a cop from it was copper mine more north of us, and they used to train, use the railroad to bring the copper ore down to the coast to ship it out to the lower 48, or outside as we call it up here with a capital O. So there used to be a railroad going into the interior of Alaska, but when the copper mine shut down, the railroad shut down and they pulled all the rails and they never made a road. And so we're cut off from the middle of the state now by land. Um, so it's isolating to an extent. And so that kind of which is why, when it's cold and dark and wet, writing keeps me sane because it's kind of too icky to go outside because I'm not skiing. No, thank you. I like my bones where they are, so I don't ski. I do a little, I wouldn't say hiking. I walk. I don't hike. I walk. But if it's blowing 70 miles an hour and raining, I'm not out there.
Yeah.
So writing is a very good, you know, 6 month out of the year.
And I know that you did mention that you have a local mystery series set
Yes.
in your area.
Hmm.
I imagine it draws on a lot of Alaska history and lore.
It was funny because for that particular series, the Charlotte Brody mysteries as they're known to some of us. Um, the first one was I was actually researching a different book set in Alaska. I was researching a post-apocalyptic futuristic story. And the idea was that because society has gone through some kind of hell it went through, folks were actually the technology was set back as far as, there's no electricity being generated really. So how, there's no contact really with the outside world. How would people survive? What would they be doing? What kind of, even 100 years after this incident, whatever the inciting incident was, people make a society. So what would be available? So I was looking back at old newspapers and things and information, trying to get a history of the areas to, well, if you were cut off from the world, what would you be able to do yourself? So I was thinking, oh, so about 100 years
Uh-huh.
ago, what would be available for those who didn't have cell phones, didn't have television, didn't have this, that, and the other thing? What kind of businesses could be homegrown fairly easily? At the time, my husband was on the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I was talking about looking at the history of the town, and he was looking at a map of the city, and the commission was looking for land to sell, and there was a parcel right by the high school, beautifully sized parcel, and like really nice size, would be perfect to fit a little house on it, but right there, within walking distance of town, right by the schools. Great. Not for sale. And somebody said, it's a cemetery. I'm like, it's a cemetery. Some people who have lived here for years and years did not know there was a cemetery there. So we went and investigated, talked to the gentleman who lives next door, and he was telling us a story. And the story was about what he'd heard. Now, he was an older man, so this was before his time even, but he heard about that there was a prostitute buried in the cemetery, and her child was buried in another cemetery in town because one was consecrated ground and one wasn't. So I got the idea for murdering a prostitute. Sorry, it's just one of those things. But then I went back to going through the newspaper archives and looking through things, and I found so I was finding more about our town, Cordova. I do use Cordova as its name. I don't fictionalize the name. I do kind of move buildings around in it. But I took that as a probable real life situation and incorporated it in the story. And looking through other historical, through the newspaper articles, found one about a gentleman who had been found in a burned building, but it turns out he had been hit in the head first, and the fire had been set. So that's the second book. And then the third book,
Uh-huh.
the first full-length movie film, so it was a silent film in Alaska, was this movie called The Chechakos. And I got the idea to bring a movie company to town for the third book. And because that really happened, there was actually a movie company. They were in the spring, when it wasn't so nasty out, but they were filming on the glacier that's not one of the glaciers that's not too far from here. And one of the actress who was leading the film actually fell in a crevasse, not a very deep crevasse. She was fine, but she was stuck down there till they could get her out. So I was like, oh, that'd be a fun, kind of premise for somebody for a body. So for the new book for a murderous business, I actually I'm just gonna leap into that one. For a murderous business, taking things from real life. We were watching, or sort of watching, a series on the History Channel called Food That Made America. And it was the episode about cereal. So Kellogg, you know, the Kellogg brothers, and C.W. Post, who posts cereals and post them.
Yeah, there's some really
Oh
weird
yeah, yeah,
stuff behind
it
that
is.
serial.
But C.W. Post, very successful company, but he had some issues, and when he passed away, his daughter took over the company at 27 years old. And this was back in the early 1920s,
Mhm.
late teens, early 1920s. And it was like, who is this woman who, as, not even 30, she's the CEO or president of this massive company, really, for the time, very big company and doing a lot. So I'm listening to what she's doing. She got in touch with Clarence Birdseye, frozen Birdseye frozen foods. So he had invented the process of this flash freezing kind of situation, but because you could freeze it, but people didn't have home freezers. Grocery stores didn't have the freezer section. But her name was Marjorie Merriweather Post, and she went to him and said, "Let me buy your company, and I will take care of, we'll get this done." And she basically got frozen foods into American grocery stores and into American houses, and made a lot of money.
Wow.
But it took her a while to convince the men who were in charge of the money at Postum to agree to this, because they were like, "Oh, no. It's like, no, this is going to be a thing." And she was right. I mean, it was a massive, massive change in how America does food, so that you could buy frozen food, take it home, have it defrost, and have it for dinner.
Well, this has been lovely chatting with you about your writing. And you've talked about what maybe your next upcoming project that you just turned in. But if people wanted to find you online, where would they go?
Well, I have my website, which I am horrible about updating, the front page of it, kathypeggaw.com. I am on Blue Sky way more than I should be. I am on Instagram as well, Kathy_Peggaw.
So I will put links to those in the show notes.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, Heather. Appreciate it.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Lesbian Historic Motif Podcast. See the show notes for links to people and topics. Most shows will have a transcript linked as well. If you have a book announcement, a topic suggestion, or might like to appear on the show, please drop me an email. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate it and subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and consider supporting our Patreon.